This is Tyro TV. What are we going to cover on our show? We're going to cover comics, animation, gaming, conventions, music, whatever we want. So I hope you tune in and join us, and hope you enjoy our show.
Rolling in over top. And it put me in mind of an old story that I read in a magazine years ago. And it talks about a little boy and his mother, who every morning to start their day would walk hand in hand along the water's edge. Now, right from the time the little guy could toddle off on his own, occasionally he would drop his mother's hand and he would walk up the beach. And there he would collect something that had been left behind by the tide. Whether it was a piece of seaweed or a little shell. His favorite, though, was if he ever found a fish trapped in a rock pool and the puddle slowly drying in the sun, he would pick it up and very solemnly, very gently, take it down to the water's edge and throw it in. Because that's where it belonged. Now the mother watched this with a smile on her face for years, and he got bolder and bolder in returning his treasures to the ocean, and one day he got too bold. He walked too far out into the surf, and a riptide grabbed his feet and started to pull him out to sea. Now she was terrified watching this happen, but before she could dive in to try to save him, wouldn't you know it, a big wave picked the little guy up out of the ocean, very softly, very gently, threw him back up on the beach. That's where he belonged. And I've always loved that story because it talks about balance and just being nice to other people without expecting reward, and sometimes it does come back to you. So this is our version of it. It's called Fisherman's Boy.
I'm talking to musical guest Heather Dale. Hi Heather, how are you today?
Hey Tyro, man, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing fine.
Awesome.
So what was your reaction when you found out you were going to be the musical guest of honor?
Oh, I was thrilled. I was thrilled. I get a chance to do a lot of science fiction conventions. I have been a lifelong reader of science fiction, fantasy. I watch all of the sci-fi TV shows and movies that come out. And so getting a chance to come and hang out with people who read the same books I do, love the same characters and comics and things that I do is such a treat. And to be a guest of honor is just, it's really awesome. I really enjoy it.
So how many Boskones have you been to?
I've been to 2. I got a chance to come last year. It was our first time and loved it, absolutely loved it. A lot of really neat science panels because with being where we are, it's close to a lot of fantastic scientific universities, MIT, a lot of companies that have cutting edge scientists that come and offer panels on their specialties. So we just, we loved it. It was so much fun. There was a lot of music. There were a lot of other events going on. And so when we got the invitation to come back this year, we were just totally thrilled.
Cool.
So my dad, I definitely get my wanderlust from my parents. My parents, when they were first married, they abandoned life in Canada and they moved to the outback of Australia, right in the middle of the desert. They bought an old VW van and they just sort of puttered around the outback, looking at all the little tiny towns and local villages and stuff. What? Come on, they're not that old.
I mean, it was just after the advent of internal combustion.
Well, okay, yeah, it was probably a new van at that point, but so I grew up with all these crazy stories of my parents' adventures. My dad, when he was 19 years old, got to go up to the Arctic. He was a civilian radio operator on a surveying mission up above the Arctic Circle, and he loved it up there. And it took him until 10 years ago to get a chance to go back. He was there in January and February, in the dead of winter. It was dark, it was minus 50 degrees every day. Celsius or Fahrenheit, doesn't really matter at that point. It was cold, it was harsh, but he loved it. He loved it. The community that he was living in Iqaluit, is primarily Inuit. It's a wonderful, wonderful culture. Their elders still tell the old tales to help educate the youngsters in the schools. And so Dad got a chance to hear a lot of traditional stories. And this is a great story of magic that inspired astronomers to name one of our solar system bodies. It used to be a planet for a short while, but now it's, I think, a dwarf planet or a planetoid or a, planet-ish. But it's called Sedna. And Sedna has a very interesting story. Sedna was a beautiful Inuit girl, and one day she and her father went out on a long voyage across the empty ocean in a skin boat, in a kayak, each with their own paddle. Now in those days the ocean was empty. It had no life. Nothing moved in the blackness between ice and deep. And so their presence on the surface attracted the attention of a storm who lived on the far horizon. Curious, as storms are, it came and it started to swirl around the little boat, playing with this new toy. Sensing their danger, Sedna and her father turned the boat and started to make for the safety of the far harbor. Now Sedna had a great heart, and so she put all of her strength behind each stroke of the paddle, but her father was cowardly and craven. He looked back, and he thought to himself, this boat would go faster if it was lighter. And so without warning, he reached out, he grabbed his daughter, and he threw her into the icy deep. Now that could have been the end of the tale, but it wasn't. Because Sedna had such a great heart, she swam behind the boat and she grabbed a hold and wouldn't let it advance. Or her father panicked, he grabbed the paddle, he started to hit her fingers to make them release, but she refused. And she wouldn't have. Finally, the terrible cold turned her fingers into clear icicles. And with one tap, the ice shattered and she fell fingerless down into the deep with these shards of ice following after. Well, that could have been the end of the tale, but it wasn't. Because Sedna had such a great heart, she looked around herself in the empty blackness and she thought, if this is to be my new home, I don't want to be alone. And And so with a force of will, she turned each one of those fingers into a new animal that had never existed before. They became the first walrus, the first seals, whales, all the creatures that now live with her in the deep. Said never roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. Said never roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. From her hands they fell, children of the ocean swell, with ice's twinkle given sight. She offered them a name, and seals they all became, and laughing took a coat of dappled light. Set now roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. Set now roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. From her hands they fell, ever in the sea to dwell, nimble-fingered, quick and live. She offered them a name, and otters they became, keepers of her secrets in the ice. Set now roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. Set now roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. From her hands they fell, mightiest of all, but slow and gentle as the tides. She offered them a bed, and whales they all became, to tread the paths the lesser Argentine. Set now roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. Set now roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. Set now roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone. Set now roamed the deep, the cold forgotten deep. No one wants to be alone.
Now, how did you get started into music?
Oh, I grew up in a really musical family. I'm actually from Toronto in Canada, and my parents were musical. They weren't musical in a really formal way, but we would sit around the kitchen table. My dad would pull out a guitar or a banjo, and we'd just sing songs. This was one of the things we did at night. And my mom played piano. My grandma was a piano teacher. And so I grew up loving music and being part of folk music and Celtic music. And a lot of times my dad would make up funny songs based on science or, space or things like that. And I didn't realize until I was a lot older that there are tons of people who enjoy making music based on science fiction and fantasy. So when I finally discovered conventions, I was hooked.
Now, that would be the term filking when you make it up with sci-fi, flair, and all that?
Well, the term filk was sort of a play on the word of folk. And this is, decades ago. People used to do music at science fiction conventions because it was fun and it was something people could do together. And it started out mostly people making up funny new lyrics based on old songs, like Beatles songs or old folk songs. And they would make up new lyrics that talked about, an Isaac Asimov book or space travel or anything that was sort of appropriate for those of us who love that kind of thing. And so filk was early on this idea of making up new lyrics to old songs. And that's expanded over the last few decades in that now we just use the term filk to be any kind of music that is relevant to science fiction and fantasy fandom. And that can be songs that people are writing themselves, songs that people find out there in the world which have something to do with, magic or anything like that. Or again, the old school way of doing filk where you'd come up with new lyrics to an old tune.
Yeah, cool. Now you've written a lot of songs. How many songs would you say you've written by now?
A couple of hundred at least. I'm actually not as prolific as some musicians. I know some people who just churn out dozens every year. They're so easy to do for them. I tend to wait and think about something. I really think about a book that I've read or a new character that's come my way or an old folk story or a legend from world mythology. And then I take the time to really craft something that says what I want it to say. And so I've written a couple of hundred, but that's over my whole life. I haven't written that many in the last couple of years.
Right.
So this is a King Arthur song. I am a huge King Arthur fan. I'm voracious. I will grab every new King Arthur-oriented novel, even if it's not specifically King Arthur. It informs so much of fantasy that I'm a sucker for anybody, even vaguely Arthurian. So this one is the tale of Sir Gawain. Now, Sir Gawain was a wild child. Hmm? It is. Was it not? See, it says on the magic list. The magic list that I wrote. Those of you who know us know that I often don't remember to write a set list, but I did this time.
The magic list that you wrote that bears no resemblance to the magic list that you wrote for me.
I didn't write it for you. You see, I didn't write it for you. I wrote it for my own amusement. And boy, am I amused. So this is the tale of Sir Gawain. Now, Sir Gawain was the wild child of Camelot. I love him. He was the prince of the Orkney Isles. He was this rough and tumble prince of a pagan realm, one of the oldest kingdoms that became part of Arthur's world. He was quick to anger, but quick to forgive. He was loyal, he was brave, he was the first one to step up to defend the weak. And so when a green man, one of the gods of the forest, arrives in Camelot and starts to lay about himself with insults, well, it's Gawain who steps up and offers to defend Camelot's honor in a duel to the death, to be fought a year and a day hence. Over the course of that year, Gawain chases the green man, the green knight, through the forest, through the countryside, never quite catching him. And over the course of that quest, he faces trial after trial, temptation after temptation, and overcomes them all. And for the rest of his life, Gawain wears a green belt or a green sash to remind himself of all the lessons he learned on this quest about faith and loyalty. This is Gawain and the green belt. New Year's Day, dawning wet on Britain's shore. King's Hall roused by the pounding on the door. A giant knight dressed in green, never seen before, hefts an axe and holds it high and lets a challenge roar. You craven men may fear dishonor, but you fear my vengeance more. For that's fear that chills you like a wraith, and it's doubt you gird about your waists. It's rare the man who hold to faith and face me in the morning. Sir Gawain, pagan prince of northern isles, he shouted, "Shame on you, brothers, on your silence." He took the axe and struck his blow and brought the giant low. He raised his head and held it high and met the giant's eye and cried, "I'll meet your vengeance in a year. We'll see who'll die, you or I. For that's fear that chills you like a wraith, and it's doubt So Gawain leaves upon his quest with a 5-point star, sign of faith upon his chest. He sees his foe, travels west, not knowing where to go. Oh, there's no clue until a baroness has offered aid to show, but only if he stays as guest within her bower 30 days, no less. Oh, that's fear that chills like a rain, and it's that you gird about your waist. It's where the man will hold to faith and face me in the morning. She plays the maid, but vain the baroness's hope. Gawain's not swayed, for another lady holds his oath. She offers body, offers land, but each advance is spurned. So she puts a belt into his hand, the gift of magic, earned by constancy in face of all temptation to his given word. Now that's fear that chills like a wraith, but this is hope you gird about your waist. It's where the man will hold to faith and face me in the morning. New Year's Day, dawning wet on Britain's shore, and Gawain meets that same green knight once more. A man laughs and gives his hand instead of chariot speed. Gawain at last perceives his God and bends a reverent knee. Take and wear my lady's belt, the green man gladly cries, and see to it you serve us well in all paths of life. Be constant and be faithful, and wear that belt for all to see. That a man came here for justice and left here blessed by me. He left here blessed by me. Left here blessed by me. He left here blessed by me.
In 1996 was your first release?
I did, yeah.
Yeah. How
That
was
was,
that record?
oh man, that was fun. I was just in university. I was in college, and I just started writing songs because I had discovered historical reenactment. There's a group called the Society for Creative Anachronism. It's a worldwide group of medievalists, people who love the Middle Ages, and they don't want to just read about it in books. They want to try making the clothing and wearing the clothing, or try brewing the beer, or making the food, or trying sword fighting. And so this huge organization, I fell in love with it, and I started to write songs inspired by the age of chivalry, knights in armor, romance, you know, all that good stuff. And in 1996, I had written enough of these songs and was singing them at events and gatherings. People said, well, I want to take that home so I can play it for my friends. So my dad, who is the techie of the family, he took me out to Radio Shack. And for about $22, he bought me this tiny little mixer and a really cheap microphone. And I think I taped it to like a lamp or something in order to tape this first thing. But I learned, with almost no equipment, I learned how to capture a really good performance, something that felt vibrant and exciting. And so I taped those onto one cassette tape, and I made a few copies, and people went crazy for it. And so I couldn't keep up with the demand. So I started writing more songs and doing more tapes. And then after a few years, I got a chance to go to a studio and start working on CDs. And I've been doing CDs ever since. I've done 16 solo albums now, which is kind of crazy when I think about it.
So do you have a favorite out of all?
Oh my gosh.
CDs
You know,
and
I think I could say my favorite is a CD that we have called Avalon, because I'm a big King Arthur fan. Ever since I was a little kid, these pictures of castles and Camelot and King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table and Guinevere and the ladies, those really captured my imagination. And so when I started writing songs, of course, I turned to all those stories that I knew and loved. And Avalon is a collection of, I think, close to 20 songs that I've written inspired by King Arthur. And they're not just retelling the stories, you know, this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened. A lot of the times, I take on a first-person perspective, and I'll sing as if I was Lancelot, or as if I was Morgan Le Fay, or if I was Arthur. And I try to think what they would want to say. And so a lot of those songs are really personal to me.
Oh, wow, cool. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So you're from Toronto?
I am. Born and raised. I am Canadian. It took me a long time to finally hear the Canadian accent that people say that I have. I figure everybody else has accents, but whenever I say a boot, people laugh. So I'm learning. But I am Canadian, and I grew up in the east end of Toronto. And Toronto is a huge, big, sprawling city. It has about 2 million people now. And I love it. It is multicultural like you wouldn't believe. We've got representations of probably like 150 countries. There are people from there living in Toronto. There's wonderful restaurants, there's arts and culture festivals for all these different people all the time through the year. So I wouldn't live anywhere else. I really love it.
So, but you've traveled a lot for a lot of conventions.
Oh yeah, big time. Well, the last 8 years, my partner Ben Deschamps and I, decided that we would try to do music full time, because we'd had day jobs and we were paying the bills through part-time jobs. And we said, all right, let's try to just do music and see if we can make a living at it. And we didn't know how long that would last, but we gave it a shot. And so 8 years ago, we packed everything in the station wagon, we called ahead and we booked a few shows, and we started traveling. And those were science fiction conventions, those were folk clubs, they were pubs in like little tiny places. We do house concerts where people will gather, 30 people together in their living room, and we'll do a big concert for them. And right up to festival stages when there's thousands of people out there listening and singing along. And so for 8 years, we have traveled all over North America, all over Europe. We've just got some crazy road stories. It's been a really amazing life, and we'll keep doing it as long as people keep enjoying the music.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Thank you.
What's the one story that was like
Oh boy.
really wild? Or
Oh, we've got so many. One of them that comes to mind, though, was we were traveling in England, and English roads are teeny. I mean, they have highways, they have motorways like we do here, but a lot of the little places that you want to go and visit have tiny little roads, and they twist and turn, and it's hard to figure out where you're going. Well, we were in the west of England, and we were trying to figure out how to get to this little pub that we were supposed to be playing at. And as we were going around a hill on this little tiny road, there was this big roaring sound, and over the hill, apparently, there was an Air Force base right next to us, and we had no idea. These two jet fighters come screaming over the hill, right over top of us. And so, of course, we're like, ah. And while Ben is craning his head to see what kind of planes they are, because he's a huge Air Force nut, he loves planes, he's looking. I'm yelling and pointing at the road going, sheep, 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 because apparently the planes had scared out these 5 or 6 sheep, and they were running like crazy down the middle of the road. So we managed to avoid them, but it was a combination of extremely rural and very farm-oriented, i.e. this livestock in the middle of the road, and super high-tech planes going right on top of us. And we just had to laugh. And I'm really glad it worked out okay and nobody got hurt. But we have those moments all the time where you couldn't expect it.
This is from our Avalon CD, which is a whole jam-packed full of King Arthur songs. It covers the whole story. This is early on in the story when King Arthur is this young man who suddenly is revealed to be the king, the next king. And he hadn't been trained for that. He was this teenager who never thought that he would amount to anything. And suddenly they said, we're at war, you're going to lead us. What a terrible responsibility. And luckily for Arthur, he had met someone that he knew he wanted to have beside him for whatever life threw at him, and that was his Guinevere, that was his girl. And I used to wonder, what would a young man, this idealistic young man facing such challenges, what would he have said to his girl when offering marriage? Because it wasn't an easy life he was offering. And I kept reading stories and watching movies, and I never saw that played out exactly the way I saw it in my head. So I wrote it myself. So this is King Arthur's proposal to Guinevere. It's called As I Am. I suppose that I look different without the robes and crown. I come to stay before you with no riches, no renown. For here I am no leader, I am just a humble man. And I only ask you take me as I am. I'm not looking for perfection, and I'm not offering a saint. No, I'm not looking for a pretty bird to put in some restraint. The only thing I want is that you love me if you can. And I only ask you take me as I am. I offer you a look inside, I offer you that trust. I need your strength to help me fight the battles that I must. I need you to remind me of the light we bear within, that there's more to life than struggle and the things we seek to win. Don't take me out of duty, and don't take me out of pride. Just take me if the man you see is one you stand beside. I'm offering an open heart, I'm asking for your hand. And I only ask you take me, oh, you take me as I am. You take me as I
Ben's a longtime science fiction fan as well.
Okay.
But we met because we had both been doing music separately. He's from Canada as well. He's from a farming community about 500 miles northeast of Toronto. And he had been a musician in Ottawa, where he grew up, and then also in England, because he had been working there for a few years. And so he had just come back to Toronto. I was looking for someone to go on tour with. Because in Canada, I mean, to go from province to province, it's a long day's drive between each major city. It's 9 or 10 hours.
Oh, wow.
So to do that on your own is dangerous. You know, if you fall asleep at the wheel, you'll be in the ditch. So I thought, let's see if I can make a new friend and we can go out on tour together. So I put an advertisement in the local papers and in the music stores on posters saying, this is what I'm looking for, someone who plays a lot of instruments, is serious about music, but a nice person, you know, that we could get along. I want the person to be professional and, you know, to come out on tour with me. And the first person who arrived at my door was Ben. And who knew that it would be a perfect match? But I was not expecting it. I figured it would be somebody, you know, maybe with a jeans and a t-shirt and maybe a guitar. Well, this guy shows up. He's 6'1". He has long brown hair, a motorcycle jacket and motorcycle boots, and he looks like a biker. And I'm thinking, what have I done? I've invited this stranger into my house. And it turns out he is the sweetest man, and he is such a great musician. And he and I have been just amazing partners ever since. And I feel so blessed to be out on the road with him. So.
Now you mentioned, what instruments does he play? What instruments do you play?
Well, we have a pretty good division. I've never learned how to play guitar. In my family, that was always my dad's instrument. So I played piano and other things. So I play piano. I play a bunch of Irish instruments like tin whistles and flutes and hand drums. And Ben plays pretty much anything with strings. He can play guitars, he can play mandolins, he can play violin, double bass, anything. He's a wizard with anything with strings. And he plays some other stuff. He plays saxophone, but there's not much call to play saxophone at a science fiction convention. So we don't do that one very often.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite instrument?
You know, I actually really like whistles. Tin whistles or penny whistles, depending on what you want to call them. They sound so Irish, and that's a big part of my heritage. So whenever I hear a melody on a tin whistle, it transports me, and I just feel like I'm in another world. It's so beautiful. So those are my favorite.
Okay. Now, the genre of music you play, would you say is folk music, Irish music?
I like to call it modern Celtic music, because I've got a real Celtic style. I mean, I sing sort of like a Celtic lilt, and it's a really fun, delicate, but very appealing style. And it's modern because we like to throw in a little hint of rock and roll or a little hint of blues or some world music influences. And so it's a mishmash. It's like Celtic. It's like people from King Arthur's day have come forward and have access to all of the other neat stuff that's happening in the modern era. So it's like 21st century, you know, old Celtic style.
Well, anything else you want to leave for our viewers?
Well, just if anybody wants to find out more about my music, I've got a full website. It's heatherdale.com. Okay. And we've got lots of crazy stuff on there, stories from our travels. We've got music. We have our own MP3 download store if people want to check out the music. We've got videos on YouTube. Basically, you know, I would love for people to check us out and share our music with us.
Oh, you do have a lovely voice, and I was listening to your concert.
Thank you so much. It was great to meet you.
Yeah, it's good to meet you. Thanks. Well, check out Heather's site and check in with us next episode.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We could bring that in, because of course this informs a lot of novels, media things.
I thought it was a song about mom.
I'm telling you. Actually, the first time we performed this, we did it in Ben's farming community up near Ottawa. And afterwards, his dad came up and he said, "Don't tell your mother, but I like that song the best." So keep that in mind. This one has a refrain. It comes back, so please do raise your voices, sing loud, sing proud. As with anything in our concert, if you hear a chorus that you would love to leap in on, please do. If you can leave verses to us, that would be great. But choruses are fair game. So this is called The Farmer's First Wife. Well, there was an old farmer lived over the hill. If he ain't moved on, he's living there still. Bye, bye, doodle-bye, bye, bye, doodle-bye, beautiful. Now the devil came to him one day. He said, "One of your kin I'm gonna take away. Bye, bye, doodle-bye, bye, bye, doodle-bye, singing bye, bye, doodle-bye, bye, bye, doodle-bye. He said, "Please don't take my only son. Work on the farm that's gotta be done. Bye, bye, doodle-bye, bye, bye, doodle-bye. Oh, but you can have my nagging wife. I swear by God, she's the curse of my life. Bye, bye, doodle-bye, bye, bye, doodle-bye. Singing bye, bye, doodle-bye, bye, bye, doodle-bye. So they marched on down to the gates of hell. He said, "Kick up the fire, boys, we'll roast her well." Bye, bye, doodle-bye, bye, bye, doodle-bye. So out came a little demon with a spitting chain, but she up with her foot and she knocked out his brains, singing bye, bye, doodle-bye, bye,
I'm having a great time. We've got a bunch of books and people are buying them. We get to meet all kinds of cool people.
How's the convention been for you?
Not too bad. I've actually sold a few copies of my own book that just came out recently, and one to a Duran Duran fan who says she's going to introduce me to the band, which, as a fan myself, is awesome.
Now, are you the writer? And what do you guys do for the press?
For the press, I'm the publisher.
I'm one of the editors, and we've both got stories here and there.
Yep.
Okay, so you're both writers as well, so you have stuff in all the books. Do you guys have a favorite?
It's dangerous.
Yeah, okay. I'll give you a pass because you don't want to give all your writers mad at you and stuff submitting.
Well,
This is worth pointing out.
yeah, I'm kind of fond of this book. This book is a collection of stories by a woman named Heather Fowler, and she writes like magic realism. But what's nice is she is donating all of her profits to Planned Parenthood, and Pink Narcissus is matching her contribution. So 60% of the profit goes to charity. So
That's great. Now, when did you guys get started?
let's see, we started in May of 2010.
Yeah,
so
we're
this
coming up
is
on an anniversary.
we're coming up on our third year.
And where do you publish out of, print out of?
We're located in wherever I am, technically, which is Auburn, Mass.
What would you like to tell people about Narcissus Press?
Yeah, but what do you want to tell people?
We're looking for the sort of fiction that you might have trouble placing elsewhere because of, conventional genre boundaries or because the big publishers are afraid to take a risk. We're looking for edgy work, work that's different. I mean, I guess really everyone is, but I think that we like to laugh,
Yeah, we do like funny
right?
stories that make you think,
Yes, stories that make you think.
but also entertain you at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. So the usual.
We want it all.
Now, who do you get for your artists? I notice you have nice art on some of your books there.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Where is he? He was here.
Yeah,
I saw,
actually,
we saw our, yeah.
Our main artist is Duncan Eagleson,
Yeah,
and
Duncan Eagleson.
there are several of his prints here. He did several of our covers.
Yeah.
This large piece back here is the art that became the cover of the Elf Love book. He also did Feasting with Panthers. And Bleeding Hearts. Which I think is a very elegant cover.
But he usually also does a lot of our layout and other artwork for the press, and he's just fantastic. He really is.
So how many people, so was it the three of you that pretty much run Narcissus Press, or is there more people involved?
Well, there are a couple more. There's Josie Brown is one of our editors. She's worked on several of these books, and poor Princess Stacy, who does a lot of work, but her name has not been on any covers yet. So
Right.
so we have three editors really, and then Duncan's our art director, and then I'm kind of keep an eye on everything. But we hire other artists to do different covers for different things, and so. But that's about it, yeah. So really the five of us, yeah.
I think that's right, yeah.
So if new writer or somebody wants to submit stories, would they just contact you through the website, or is that the best method?
That's a good place to start, right?
That is a good place to start, yeah. I'd say through the website. They can
Website,
always.
yep.
I'm always willing to answer an email if someone has some questions or what have you. So our address is on the website.
Yep, we've also got guidelines up there, right? And usually if there's a new project we're working on, it'll be described on the call on the website.
Yep. Okay.
Anything else you want to share to the viewers? words of wisdom? Or
Read more books, kids.
Yes,
Read more books.
Well, a song about never saying never and never being told what you can or cannot do. This is one of us. Before I got to fighting, or when fighting got to me, I looked to find examples on the field of chivalry, and I saw mighty arms, much stronger than my arms could ever be. So I thought perhaps that field was not for me. But still I stayed and watched the fighting till one figure stood apart, in armor newly fashioned and a helm more pot than art. But each blow was thrown with honor and the lightness of the heart. So I took that step which soon became a start. 'Cause she was not the biggest fighter, nor one to raise a fuss, but I remember being proud that she was one of us. And we might never stand together in a shield wall side by side. Because of her I lift my sword with pride. She was ladylike and lively, not the type you would expect, with a braver heart than many and a slot shot to respect. And I guess she'd once decided this was where she'd like to be, and I thought if she could do it, why not?